Hi, I'm Gretchen Sable and I'm president of LWV ABC. We're very pleased tonight to have with us Kay King from NAMI, and she's going to be talking about how we can maintain our mental health, especially during this time of isolation and quarantine. Thanks.
Welcome. I just put in the chat function my email address. My email address will also be on the last slide that I'm showing tonight. And I'm delighted to join you. I would like you to, if you would, mute yourself. I think I'm hearing feedback. So if you could mute yourself and use the chat function, that would be great. And I'm actually going to probably ask Gretchen, since Susan is having a little bit of trouble with sound. I'm going to ask Gretchen if you'll monitor the chat. I will stop from time to time to see if there's any comments in the chat function. So let me pull up my PowerPoint. I am a community educator for NAMI, Minnesota. I teach about 4,000 people a year, and I've done that for 13 years for NAMI. I have a background. I've been a general manager of large hotels and resorts. I've been a manager of a retirement community with independent living and assisted living, but I have worked for NAMI full-time for 13 years. And NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we're the Minnesota chapter. Just like the League has chapters throughout the United States, so does NAMI. Every state has its own state office, and then our national office is located in Washington, D.C. And we do three things at NAMI. We do education, we do support, and we do advocacy. Our audiences are the general public, but we also do a lot of work with families who have a loved one who lives with mental illness. We do a lot of training for professionals, a lot of training for teachers, a lot of training for people who manage a mental illness themselves. And when Susan and I were talking about a topic, we settled upon not a mental illness topic, but a mental health topic, because these are very stressful times. So tonight's program is Minding Your Mental Health During COVID-19. And this first slide is really so you have our website. It's namimn.org. And if you're searching for us, be sure you put Minnesota, or you'll get our national office, or you'll get one of the other states. So namimn.org. And we have many, many resources. I've been working remotely, as have my colleagues, since last March. And I teach about 5 or 6 classes a week online. I've taught 220 Zoom classes probably since COVID started. And I teach classes that are an hour and a half, as this tonight is. I teach classes that are 8 hours. And an example of that is mental health first aid. You know, it's a course taught nationwide. It's the class I rather wish that we had had in high school, with the basics about mental illness. So let's get started. I am going to stop regularly, so please put your comments, and I will ask you some questions from time to time. You'd put those answers in the chat function. Now, if you're not familiar and haven't used chat before, you know, if you hover with your mouse, you'll see, you know, something that says chat. It looks like a conversation bubble, and you can talk to everyone, or you can talk to an individual if you wish. So there's a drawdown that allows you to talk to everyone, or just perhaps talk to Gretchen if you want to, because she's going to be kind of my monitor of the chat. Or, you know, you can talk to each other. So let's get started. We're going to learn 4 things that you can do for your good mental health. One of them is, you know, the impact of COVID-19. You know, I tell people as I talk to them that we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. And we're in different boats. Some days I feel like I'm on a yacht. My family members are not sick right now. I have a job and I'm being paid. So I feel like some days I'm on a yacht. Some days I struggle and I feel like I'm in a rowboat with both oars, but a leak in the boat. And some days I feel like I'm in a canoe trying to paddle up the Mississippi against the current with one paddle, or no paddle sometimes. Also, understand that COVID-19 has had a huge impact on diverse communities. You're very much an organization that's interested in education and policy. And so you've certainly been looking at the statistics to see how Indigenous people in Minnesota have had the most deaths per 100,000 people, that our Black population has been duly affected, and the same thing is true throughout the country. And we're also going to spend quite a bit of time on bullet point number 3 to learn some steps that you can take personally to promote good mental health. Now, I'm going to give you some ideas, but quite frankly, this presentation is a lot more fun and a lot more interesting if you share ideas as well. Now, if you're having any trouble with the chat, it is okay to unmic, but as you know, it's hard to not talk over each other when you have a good sized group. So the chat seems to work the best. Now, I never do a presentation without talking about, well, what do you do if, with your own resiliency and your own resources, if you have an issue or a problem right now that's greater than you can handle yourself, or greater than you can talk over with your spouse or partner, or greater than you can talk over with your faith leader, or greater than you can talk about with a good friend, then where do you turn if you're struggling? So we are going to talk just briefly about that at the end. And we also never do a class without giving some resources for suicide prevention. So there are classes on suicide prevention, but I will give you a couple of resources, tonight. So let's talk a little bit about getting out a piece of paper and pencil, or some of you might take notes on a device. Some people take notes on their phone or take notes on, an iPad. But write down a few things that you've maybe been struggling with in the last few months, or maybe the last year. For example, I noticed my energy level, it's good, but it was even better before COVID. And so, I find that my energy level is a little bit different this last year. I find sometimes my sleep cycle is a little bit different than it was pre-COVID. You probably have maybe a little fear about some things that you didn't really have before this. And it could have been fear about the elections. It could have been fear about the economy. It could be fear about catching this COVID-19 illness. It could be older adults in your family that you've been just worried sick about. It could be that you've been concerned about the holidays. Even though holidays are happy times, we've just come off a couple of months of holidays and they're stressful, even though often that's happy stress. This year, most people couldn't gather. Some of you are concerned about racial injustice. That is not new, but certainly with Mr. Floyd's murder, which happened 2 miles from my house, certainly, it's a conversation now, a long needed conversation. And we're coming up to a trial for Derek Chauvin, which is going to be in March. So think about all the intersection, the confluence of all of the things that we've dealt with in the last 11 months. It's quite remarkable that people are as resilient as they are. So you're going to get some ideas maybe from me. You're hopefully going to get some ideas from your colleagues about how you can take care of your health, including your mental health. So write down a few things you've been struggling with, and then write down a few things that you might be willing to try or look into that we talk about tonight. So I thought that the dictionary word of the year last year was going to be pivot, but it was pandemic. And you know what? That seems so obvious. If I had written the Merriam-Webster dictionary, I think I might have chosen pivot. But we've had to pivot a lot. Just when a family thought that they were doing in-school learning, all of a sudden they had to pivot to online learning. Just when they were thinking they had daycare all set up, then there was an outbreak in the daycare and they had to make other arrangements. Just when you could visit your older relatives, like my aunt who lives in a community in the Western Metro, and I could visit her during the summer, now they've had an outbreak and there's no arrangements to be able to see my 96-year-old aunt inside, at least not right now. Just when you thought that your family member was getting better from the virus, it took a turn. And the other thing is that, being alone and isolated is an aging issue too. I have an interest in older adults, and that is an issue in and of itself, but compound that with the isolation and the loneliness of COVID, and compound that with maybe already living with some mental health issues, maybe living with some anxiety, living with some depression, living a life, of course, but still struggling with those things. And then add on all the COVID things on top of that. And it's a lot. Now, you're going to smile at bullet point number 4. Who thought you could have too much family? But, usually during the given day before COVID, maybe people went to work for 8 hours. So we weren't with each other 24 hours a day. Or maybe our kids went to school for 6 or 8 hours a day. So we all weren't on top of each other. Now, I live in a house that has 2 floors. And so in my family, we don't have to be in the same room. But some people live in 1-bedroom apartments or 2-bedroom apartments, and they have no extra space where they can do schoolwork, or they can work from home, or they can just have a little bit of quiet time to try to read the newspaper. And, we lost, that extra $600 in the summer that people were receiving from unemployment. That allowed most people to make rent, for example, or maybe put towards a house payment that they owe. But, that went away. We do have some other programs that have come in their place, but people are struggling. It's really hard to sustain not having adequate income for this length of time. Now, grief is well, there's lots of different types of grief. Ambiguous loss, when we have someone in our family that starts with some mild neurocognitive disorder and it moves into more serious dementia, and that's ambiguous loss. But there's also grief for people that are younger that is different than maybe some of the grief that we experience, like me, who's in middle age. So it's not the same to have a sign in your yard that says, proud Washburn High School graduate. That's not the same as walking the stage. And so realize that a 17 or an 18-year-old who is going to wrestle in the state tournament, and there's no state high school tournament, that might have been the pinnacle of their athletic career. Not everybody goes on to wrestle or play hockey in college or to be in the Olympics. So, if you're a senior and you made it to the state basketball tournament and then there's no state basketball tournament, that's kind of a big deal for that person. I went to my first Zoom funeral/memorial service 2 Sundays ago, and I thought it really went well. It was well done, but I couldn't hug my friends. It was their mother that died, and I couldn't hug them. But there were some silver linings too. 160 people attended. And although, the rabbi and the family were in Philadelphia, the rest of us were all over, and so grandchildren from California could join in. People could do readings, and they even had a lineup of people who could say remarks if they wanted to. And so it worked, but it's not quite the same as having all your close 100 family members at your wedding. You still can have your wedding, and it can still be on Zoom, just not the same. Now, we're trying, some of us, to try to teach children and work at the same time. Not everyone's a professional educator. And if you have a grandchild or a child in your family that's on an individual education plan, that's what IEP stands for. That means that in school, they're getting extra services. Perhaps a reading specialist is working with them because they have to manage dyslexia. Maybe they have a school counselor that they get some time with in addition to the regular classroom teacher. So can you imagine a parent who already isn't a professional educator trying to help kids online, in addition to trying to do some of those extra things that might be part of an IEP plan? I know that when my mom passed away in her 80s, but when my mom was in a nursing home, I helped with some of her laundry because, quite frankly, everything would have shrunk to the size of a baby if I hadn't done some of that laundry, because I use the hottest temperatures known to humankind. And so I did some laundry. I helped with all those extra things that the staff at a long-term care facility just doesn't have staffing or time for. But now, if we can't help our family members in those facilities, that means who's picking up that slack? The way staffing is in long-term care, there's never enough time. The staff are just busy doing the skills of daily living, helping people with restrooms, helping people with eating, helping transport people, to areas of the building. And also just, the touch. We can't hug our grandkids. We can't hug our children, adult children that don't live with us. And, you can see I'm in an office of sorts in my house, and I haven't put up any artwork because, I was thinking, well, this is sort of a sprint, maybe by summer of 2020, I'll be back at the office part-time. And no, then I thought it was a middle distance race. Well, maybe we'd be sort of back to normal by the fall when school starts. Well, no. And now it's a marathon for me. And so I'm like, well, what am I waiting for? Someone said, well, couldn't you at least put a plant back there, Kay? Put a little stand with a plant. So I'm sitting on an office chair, but it's not a very good one. And so I'm now spending quite a few hours in a home office. And usually I'm out presenting, publicly speaking, and I walk around as I talk. I don't even stay at a podium. I'm like the Oprah Winfrey of mental health. And now I'm in a chair that doesn't fit me that well. I'm on, a camera, probably 5 hours a day. And I have a little Zoom fatigue. When someone says, hey, do you want to get together for happy hour on Zoom? I'm like, maybe not. And then for people who've already experienced trauma in their life, a loss of a spouse, a loss of a good friend of many years, having been in a tornado. Think about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico 3 years ago had Hurricane Maria, and many people didn't have power for a year. That's a territory of the United States. And then they had an earthquake, and then they had another hurricane more recently. And now they have COVID, just like everybody else. And so, there's an example of natural disaster trauma. If you've been sexually assaulted, if you've gone through a divorce, any of those sorts of things can certainly be trauma. And then on top of that, now all of the things I mentioned, the racial injustice, the economy, all those sorts of things. If you work in essential services, you're working, but, it can be very dangerous to have that kind of contact every day with people. And if you're working in the hospitality industry, which is the career I spent most of my time in, airlines are hurting, hotels are hurting, restaurants are closing, and they may never come back. So, there are racial disparities, and access to healthcare is one of the issues, housing, and I'm going to use my own family as an example. In the United States, much of our wealth for people, if you're fortunate enough to own your home, is tied up. The largest nut of our money is tied up in our housing, if you're fortunate enough to own a home. And, my great-grandparents came to the United States from Europe, and they had some acreage. I probably started out with 80 acres. They built a farmhouse. And then my great-grandparents had 7 boys. This is a king side of the family. They had 7 boys. And each of them, over time, that wanted to farm, picked up some farmland themselves. And my great-grandparents passed the family farm down to their oldest child, who is my grandpa. My grandpa had 2 children, my dad and my Aunt Benita, and neither my dad or my Aunt Benita wanted to farm. So that farm was sold, and a little bit of that money got passed on to my dad and to my aunt. Now, that meant my mom and dad owned a house, and they owned it after World War II when my dad served in the military. And then my mom and dad had 2 children. I'm one of them. And when I was in my late 20s, I bought my first house. So you can see that one way to wealth is kind of the ability to perhaps inherit some money. Just so you know, I didn't inherit any personally, but you pass your wealth on somewhat in housing. Now, if you're in a redlined area, redlining hopefully isn't happening in the same way it did in the 50s and 60s. But redlining in South Minneapolis meant that the covenants on your house meant that someone who was Black could not own a home in South Minneapolis. Now, that's gone away, but the institutional wealth of those generations has not caught up as it would have for someone who is maybe white European. And we'll talk a little more now in detail about this as it relates to the pandemic. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time because, again, you're quite knowledgeable people on topics, but I'm just going to have you some talking points or thinking points, for other discussion within your family and friends. But people that are from diverse communities, particularly refugees, we have the largest immigrant population for us in Minnesota is Mexican American. Somalian is next. We have a large Hmong population, which is from the northern mountains of Laos. We have a pretty decent sized community from Myanmar, the Karen community. We also have the largest Tibetan population in the United States, although it's not a huge amount of people. And so do know if you're a refugee, that's different than being an immigrant. People from Somalia did not come here, and I don't mean this even, I'm not even trying to make you smile. They did not come here for the weather. They came because they probably would have been killed if they had remained in the country they were at. Some people have come to the United States or to Minnesota because of religious persecution. Some people have come here as immigrants to go to college or for a better job, but I'm really talking about refugees right now. Now, because of many things, but some of them are just underlying health conditions that have to do sometimes with where you live. If you live in a neighborhood that has soil that was from past manufacturing that's been leveled, and in the soil is arsenic or some other chemicals like the Teflon product that was used to make, coatings on pans and stuff like that. And if it's in your water system or it's in your ground, oftentimes those are in some of the poorest not always, but sometimes those are in some of the poorest neighborhoods. So certainly people from other diverse communities do have some greater health risks for many reasons. Asthma, COPD is chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. It's the third leading cause of death in the United States. Diabetes, it's certainly an issue, a big health issue in the United States, and it is for some of the diverse populations as well, including our indigenous native population in Minnesota. The other thing is during, the riots and the looting and things, and when things were destroyed, I live in a neighborhood that on Lake Street, which is not too far from where I live, the Cub Foods and the Aldi that I shop at, they were damaged and they closed. They're open again, but it's been almost a year. And during that time, luckily, people who lived in that corridor who didn't have cars of their own were bused, if they wished to be bused, to the quarry, which is, there's a Cub Foods there. North Minneapolis on Broadway, the Cub Foods there was destroyed or damaged badly. And so those were already food deserts a little bit anyway, with not enough grocery stores. But we also have greater Minnesota. I'm from Le Sueur, Minnesota, small town south of Minneapolis. And when I was growing up, there were 2 small grocery stores. Well, now there's 1. Because people, if you have a car, you can drive to Mankato, which is about 40 minutes away. Or you can go to the edge of Minneapolis to like a Shakopee or, Savage or something like that has the big grocery stores. That's if you have a car. But if you rely on public transportation or you're an older adult who doesn't drive anymore, you really are dependent on a grocery store, perhaps in your small town. Now, my NAMI, if we were in business in a building right now, we're at 1919 University Avenue, which is in St. Paul. And we have a cleaning crew that's hired by the management company of our building that cleans probably the whole building. And I speak some Spanish. And so often if I'm working late at night, the cleaning crew, is there. And so I try to use my Spanish. And, we still have the same people for at least the last 3 years. And so as I ask them about their jobs, they'll say, well, I have 3 buildings or 3 jobs that I work in, and they're all part-time. Together, they're about 60 hours a week, but I, of course, don't have any paid time off. I don't have any vacation time. I don't have sick time. I get paid okay. My hourly wage is okay, but, I don't have health insurance, even though MNsure, for example, or any of the health exchanges, if you live in another state, are possibilities, but they may not be able to earmark money for their health insurance. And also, immigrants and refugees sometimes live in really dense populations. They're used to that from maybe the country they came from, maybe, but also think about New York City, where many immigrants land. Think about the Cedar Riverside area of Minneapolis, St. Paul, very densely populated with Somali families. And think of the cultures, close family units, We did that too, 2 generations or 3 generations ago, but now we all aspire to our own apartment or to our own family home that has 2 people and some kids maybe. And the other thing is essential workers. Think about who works as certified nursing assistants in our long-term care facilities. They are from Somalia. They are from Liberia, in Minnesota. Not to say that all certified nursing assistants, some are 3rd generation, 4th generation people that have lived in the United States. But who works in childcare in our beginning wage jobs? Who works as personal care attendants? Who works as our postal employees? Who works in our Amazon warehouse? Just go to Shakopee to the Amazon warehouse at a shift change, and you're going to see a lot of Somali workers. They have more than 30% Somali population working at the Amazon warehouse in Shakopee, as an example. Go to our poultry plants in Worthington. Go to our poultry plants in St. Cloud. Who do you think is working there? So those are essential workers, or they've been deemed such, and certainly have been at great risk during these times of strife. Now, Black Minnesotans make about 6% of our population, yet they're 25% per 100,000 of deaths. So I just want you to know that, very disproportionate. And you've seen the statistics. I'm not going to spend too much time, but I did put a couple other states that have larger Black populations. So Louisiana, that's 32% of the state population compared to our 6 that are Black. But look at the disparity of how many people are dying in these states as well as in these communities. Illinois, Chicago, of course, being the biggest city, it's 56% of deaths, but it makes up 39% of their state population that people of color. So you can get the statistics elsewhere, but the key point, of course, is that communities of color have been disproportionately affected by COVID. Now, it wasn't helpful when our politicians, and I don't just mean federal politicians, but state politicians, calling this something like the Wuhan virus or the China virus. Think about many of you, and I did it myself till pretty recently. We call, the 1918 flu epidemic the Spanish flu. It did not start in Spain. Let me repeat, the Spanish flu, that people say Spanish influenza, it did not start in Spain. But if you keep calling it that instead of the 1918 pandemic would be a better way to refer to it, then people think somehow Spaniards infected all these people and killed them in 1918. Not true. So it's really important not to name call. In the mental illness field, people say crazy, nuts, cuckoo, psycho, or they say somebody's schizophrenic. I don't call you cancer. I don't call you heart disease. Why would we call somebody bipolar? People are not illnesses, right? And so when you classify a whole category of people as Asian Americans, do you mean people from Japan? Do you mean people from Indonesia? Do you mean people from Southeast Asia? Someone from Vietnam is not the same as someone from Japan. It's a different culture, different language, but for shorthand, I guess, we kind of categorize like Asian Americans. My gosh, that's a pretty broad category if you ask me. So I think we have to be careful because words matter. They really do. And we don't want people to be more stressed than they already are because Asian Americans have been physically attacked. Asian Americans have been verbally abused as a result of language that's been used in the news and by our politicians in some cases. So enough said. Now, can you tell I'm kind of passionate about this? I told you that NAMI does education, support, and advocacy. So sometimes I get on my little high horse on advocacy. So that's, just give me a pass. I'm kind of passionate on this. This is 2 miles from my house. It's the corner of Chicago and 38th Street in South Minneapolis. So if someone was already struggling with their mental health before last May, you can see how it could be worse. Can you imagine being a Black male of a certain age, wondering if they're going to be pulled over and possibly killed as a result of a taillight out? And so, that was already an issue long before Mr. Floyd's death. And Mr. Floyd's death was not even the first incident. We've had hundreds of years of things like this. But if somebody was already struggling, some of these things we've talked about, this confluence of all these issues, has just been making it harder and harder for people who already struggle. Now, what we're seeing, not just in the first 3 months, but now 11 months later, is that we're seeing more diagnosable anxiety and more diagnosable major depression. I'm not talking about when we have 12 days of no sunlight in Minnesota, we say, I'm so depressed. If we have one more day without sunlight, I'm going to move to Mexico. I'm not talking about, that's just saying, my mood is affected by the weather. That's not the same thing as diagnosable major depression. But we are seeing more diagnosable anxiety disorders and more diagnosable major depression. And we're seeing alcohol sales skyrocketing. And it's not just the sales changing of where they're happening, like more sales in the liquor store than in restaurants, bars, and clubs. No, there's more alcohol in total being used. And most of it is being used at home because we've had restrictions on other places to use it. And people are tired. I already heard on this call that people are saying, oh, I got my shot. I'm so excited for you to get your vaccine, and I hope I'm soon going to be called up as well. But just know that, as soon as, we have a vaccine, people are going to start unmasking again, I'm guessing. They're going to start seeing the grandkids again, I'm guessing. But we don't have enough statistics really yet to say it's safe. Now, everyone can make their own decision and hopefully talk to their medical professional that they see to find out, what's safe and what's not safe. But you know what? The vaccine probably means you still do everything you've been doing now, including kind of staying in your lane, staying in your pod. But huge stress levels. And when you have high stress levels, one of the things that happens is you actually secrete stress hormones. An example would be cortisol. And we need cortisol for fight, flight, or freeze. You probably heard about that in high school psychology. But when you have this cortisol secreted at a high level for months upon months, it affects your physical health as well as your mental health. And so that's what we're talking about. Now, our mental health, we might feel some lethargy. We might feel some fear. Not necessarily diagnosable depression or anxiety, but some of those things. We might not sleep as well. We might have a racing brain where we didn't have that at night before. I know I've been more irritable. I've had to apologize to family members a few times in the last 11 months. I'm a little crabby. Now, does that mean I live with an anxiety disorder? No, but I have had to apologize a few times for my crabbiness. For physical health, oftentimes our gastrointestinal system is affected by stress. Might come out as a stomach ache, might come out as maybe you've had migraines in the past and they've been under control, but now they're creeping back. Maybe you're having stress headaches. Perhaps your sleep cycles are interfered with. Now, if you already live with diabetes, or you already live with heart disease or high blood pressure, this last year could have aggravated those illnesses. If you were predisposed to those kinds of illnesses, you might now have moved into not pre-diabetes, but diagnosable diabetes. Or you might have had just a borderline kind of high blood pressure reading or a blood pressure reading, and now you certifiably have high blood pressure. And people are putting off doctor's appointments. You didn't feel good about going into the clinic. People have put off teeth cleaning. Teeth health is very directly related to heart disease. So you can't put it off forever. And that's hard because it's stressful to think about going into a dental office or a clinic right now, but it's important. And it's important also if you have some signs and symptoms of what might be anxiety disorder or depression. Now we're going to launch into that bullet point number 3, ideas. I'm all about the ideas. And I'm sure you've got some good ones. So I'm going to talk on a number of topics and give you some pointers. And then I'd like you to put in the chat function other ideas. And I'm going to stop from time to time and I'm going to queue up Gretchen and just say, Gretchen, do we have anything in the chat function? So before I start that, I'm going to ask Gretchen because her microphone is probably better, but you can speak up if you can, Susan, too. But is there anything in the chat function right now about what I talked about before we launch into ideas?
Somebody wants to know where you're located. So
anything in the chat function, Gretchen or Susan?
you hear me?
Nope.
It says that I'm not muted.
You're okay now. I can hear you good.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So there's one, Mary Jo noted that her mother always told her the past is gone. We might not be here tomorrow, so take it one day at a time. And otherwise, Wes wanted to know where your office is located. So,
Yeah. Our office, which no one's working in, I stop in on Saturday to drop off things once in a while. It's 1919 University Avenue West in St. Paul. And we're really close to 280, not too far, I would say, from 280, but our cross street is Cleveland, and between that and Fairview in St. Paul, kind of by the Menards in St. Paul. On
wife works in the building too, and he thanks you for your presentation style, very conversational.
Oh,
So,
well, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Sue Butler noted that exercise helps.
Sure does. And so we're going to talk about some of these things in detail, but let's get started on that. And I'll stop again. I just want to make sure no one had questions about inequities and, the discrimination and things like that. So let's get started on our ideas. Now, I have to tell you that I work now from home and I'm a night person. So I never used to check my work email after about 6 o'clock, occasionally, but not very often. Now I'm looking at it at 10 o'clock because I can, right? And, I need to stop my workday. I started my day this morning at 8:30 and, here it is. And I knew I was going to speak tonight, but I was busy. So I never took a break except for my meals. And so I'm going to end up working a 12-hour day. Nothing wrong with that. I've done it much of my life, but it's important to make some decisions about when is it family time, when is it my exercise time, when is it my meal time. And then expectations. If you're like me, you have really high expectations for yourself, you have high expectations for your family members, you have high expectations maybe for the people that work for you. And are they realistic? And so sometimes, we think we can do things just as fast as we could pre-COVID, and that isn't always the case. I have to do more of my own admin work. Nothing wrong with that. But, many people that attend my class want a certificate of attendance. They take about 4 minutes for each certificate because I have to email them. And I had to do 70 certificates last week. Well, take 4 minutes times 70 and you get some idea. That's not my presentation. That's the paperwork afterwards. And then when do you work best? I already told you I've known for a long time that I'm best in the evening. Now, can I check out 1,000 people out of my hotel and be in the lobby at 7 a.m. and be chipper? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, I can. But is my best time of day to write a report or to work on my next year's budget at 7 in the morning? Nope. My best time to do that is probably 3 in the afternoon. And then also, what do you do well? I'm going to use a work analogy, but I am a good leader. I can manage other people, but I'm not as good as a CPA or a CFO, but I'm going to hire the best chief financial officer that I can hire. Do I know how to lead that person? Do I know how to motivate that person? Do I know how to understand what they're telling me? Do I know, how I can give them the tools that they need to do their job? Absolutely. But do I really understand all the intricacies of accounting? No. Okay. So you try, if you're in a position to hire, you try to perhaps, find people that work for you that are better than what you are at that specialized part. Maybe even find your partner that way. When you, if you want to raise children, isn't it great to have a partner that has some of the skills you don't have when you're raising children together? Now, here are some just general ideas, but we're going to talk about some things in more detail. And so meditation, NAMI purchased a subscription to Calm, and we have about 35 employees. And Calm, you have to pay a fee for it, but we each got the password. And so we really like that software. You don't have to use it, but that's one thing that NAMI paid for, a subscription to Calm, and we all use it. Headspace is also a paid subscription. But if you have some ideas of a book that you like with meditation in it, or maybe you listen to a not a blog, you listen to a podcast with some meditations that you like, put those in the chat because people welcome ideas. Also, I don't do yoga, but I do Tai Chi. And I've practiced Tai Chi once a week in a class for 15 years. And I've been doing Tai Chi outside all winter. My class doesn't feel comfortable being in the Y where I used to take it. So we've been outside, and the only time we canceled this winter was last Saturday. And it was pretty darn cold, so we canceled. But what I like about Tai Chi and what I'm told yoga does is it helps you work on your balance. It helps you work on flexibility. It helps you, what I like is the meditative part. I've done Tai Chi so long that I can do the Tai Chi movements without thinking, and I can use it as meditative time. And I can do it continuously for an hour and not have to think, now, where do I put my hand? Where do I put my foot? Where do I put my weight? And so when you have a practice of yoga or Tai Chi, it takes a while to learn, but once you do, you can use it in a meditative form. So when people tell me, what do I like about Tai Chi? It's about the change in energy that occurs in my body as a result of practicing it. The other thing is music in general. I hate cleaning. Full disclosure, I hate cleaning and it shows. And I want you to know that when I have to clean, I crank up the music as loud as it goes. And I like Motown. So I'm cranking up Motown and I'm cleaning the bathroom. And so I also ask people, what are you listening to? And there's been some good music available, often free of charge during COVID. And before COVID, one of my coworkers said, I really like the group Ranky Tanky. And they said it's Gullah music that was started by slaves that came to the United States in South Carolina. Well, my first job out of college was in South Carolina on Hilton Head Island. And so I was so busy working that I didn't enjoy the Gullah music. Well, Ranky Tanky speaks to my soul. And so about 3 months before COVID, the Dakota Jazz Club had Ranky Tanky come to Minnesota. And so I got to hear them in person. So I'm pitching Ranky Tanky, but it was told to me by one of my coworkers. I never would have known about it unless they hadn't recommended it. Or maybe there's a piece of classical music. You know, it was Beethoven's birthday. Maybe someone has a favorite Beethoven piece that they tell you about and you listen to it and it speaks to your soul. So if you have some great music that you like or an artist that you really like, put it in the chat function. And I'm going to stop in a little bit and I'm going to ask, you know, either Gretchen or Susan to read what's in the chat. Now I'm going to talk briefly about naps. Naps are great, but don't make them so long that they interrupt your longer sleep cycle. And we're going to be talking about sleep as its own category in a few minutes. As far as puzzles, I'm going to give you a hot tip. There's a company in Minnesota that makes jigsaw puzzles, and it's called Puzzle with a Twist. It's a company that's based here in Minnesota. They sell nationally. And for my birthday this summer, I was given a state fair puzzle. And I love the state fair. My wedding reception was at the state fair. And I want you to know that the twist part is that the picture on the puzzle box does not match the puzzle. So, you know, I have to tell you, so Fairchild, who's the mascot for the state fair, he wears a green and white striped vest. Well, they changed his vest color. And so all of a sudden it's a different color. And they put in a Ferris wheel on the puzzle that wasn't on the picture. So it's really hard when the picture does not exactly match the puzzle. So those are called Puzzle with a Twist. Now, they make lots of different pictures, not just Minnesota things, but they had the state fair. I've never done Sudoku till this year, or till last year. I got a Sudoku book. Now I do one Sudoku puzzle a day. Now, you need to know, I know quite a bit about geriatric medicine. You need to know that none of those things are going to prevent dementia. You know, Alzheimer's is the most common of the dementias. It's not going to prevent it, but it does work a different part of your brain sometimes. So, you know, I'm sure some of you have ideas that are good, like puzzles and things, so put them in the chat. Now, before I check what you put in the chat, I'm going to teach you a breathing exercise. So I carry tension in my shoulders. I used to play a trumpet, and I haven't played a trumpet since I've been 19 years old. And so now instead of breathing from my diaphragm, which is in my abdominal area, I am breathing from my chest most of the time. So I have to remind myself to breathe from my diaphragm, which helps to reduce stress. So I'm going to teach you a breathing exercise. It's called 4-7-8. And I'm going to first talk you through it. Then I'm going to demonstrate it. And then I'm going to have you try it. Now be sure you mute yourself, because when you try it, you're going to sound like a horse that has asthma. All right. So first of all, you breathe in for 4 through your nose. Then you hold your breath for 7. Now, if you're new to this, it's hard to hold your breath for 7, but hold your breath for 7. And then you exhale for 8, making a whooshing sound through your mouth. So now I'm going to demonstrate it. And under full disclosure, I whoosh for about 6. I try to whoosh for 8, but I can't whoosh that long. So I whoosh for 6, but try for 4-7-8. 4 through the nose, hold it for 7, blow out through your mouth with a whooshing sound for 8. Here I go. That was a 6 whoosh. I try for the 8, but I get a 6. Okay, you're going to do it with me. In through the nose for 4, hold it for 7, whoosh out through your mouth through 8. Let's go. I think I made 8. Woo! Now, the next thing I want you to know is that I have to remind myself to breathe like this throughout the day. And I'm so busy, I forget. So remember when you were in kindergarten? Yeah, do you remember when you were in kindergarten? Not so much. But we used to draw a turkey, with our hand. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is when you're washing your hands, which I think I wash my hands 20 times a day because of COVID, we're supposed to wash for 20 seconds. So every time I'm washing my hands, I go hand. And then I remember breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So if you have one hand, you're breathing in 5 times and you're breathing out 5 times. If you have 2 hands, you can do it 10 times. So if I'm going to wash my hands 20 times for 20 seconds, I remind myself then, okay, hands, breathe in, breathe out. So it's just a way to remember. That's all. So again, deep breathing helps reduce stress. Most of us breathe through our chest, but if you want to do abdominal breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, it's good to play a musical instrument, or it's good to do it consciously using something like 4-7-8. Now, before we talk about movement, is there anything in the chat function that we should talk about that people put in the chat?
See, Jody noted that exercising every day is a priority for her. She finds it absolutely necessary. Jerry said that getting outside in nature is good, and it is. Sue Butler loves the bedtime stories on Calm and uses the meditation. I wrote that I've been having trouble with disrupted sleep, so I have to enforce myself going to bed before midnight and getting up before 8. So sometimes I use melatonin to help with that too. Especially if I haven't been able to exercise, like in this cold weather, I've been less active.
Well, thank you. Excellent ideas. So let's talk about movement. You notice I didn't title the slide exercise, because exercise sounds like a chore, doesn't it? The idea is to try to move for 30 to 60 minutes a day. And you don't have to do it in one hunk. You can do it 3 times a day of 10 minutes each time, maybe, or 20 minutes each time. And you can dance. You can have your own personal dance party in the kitchen. You can walk, and that's my go-to exercise. In September of 2019, I walked 150 miles of the El Camino. And to get in shape for that, I would walk every day a couple miles. Well, I've continued the habit. So all throughout COVID, I've walked every day, with an exception. I didn't yesterday. Again, it's easy to blow it off when it's cold, isn't it? But I've pretty much done almost every day, a couple miles. Now, I'm bored with my neighborhood. I'm walking the same neighborhood all the time and I'm bored. So my family and friends have said, well, why don't you get in the car and drive to a pretty park? You live by Lake Harriet, you live by Nokomis. Why don't you do that? I got to tell you that if I had to get in the car and make a trip, I'd blow it off. So for me, the easiest thing is to slap those shoes on and put the grippers on and go out the back door. Now, the best exercise for you is the one you're going to do. The best movement for you is the one you're going to do. In the summer, I like biking, so I mixed it up a little bit with biking, but I don't have a fat tire bike. Maybe you have elliptical in your basement. Whatever works for you, that's the best exercise or that's the best movement. So it doesn't have to be a formal class. I have a coworker who's 26 years old, and he said, did you know that there's this thing, exercising to the oldies? I said, really? And there's a guy named Richard Simmons. I said, really? And so I just want you to know that, Jane Fonda's probably still out there too on video. So whatever works for you is good movement. Now, I'm going to continue going, but if you have any ideas for movement, please put them in the chat function because people will get good ideas. Let's talk about nutrition. I have not ever met a bakery product that I don't like. Okay. So in the winter, I think we have a tendency in Minnesota to be attracted to carbohydrates. So I am 20 feet from my refrigerator. Today, as we speak, I am 20 minutes from my refrigerator. And when I'm working in the community or I'm at work, I'm not running to the refrigerator as much as I am working from home. It's hard. I also, I like things like nuts. They're good for you. And I buy big bags at our house because they're cheaper than buying small little bags. But what I try to do is I take the nuts and I actually break them into small bags or packages, because otherwise I'm just going to scoop in that bag and probably eat a cup worth of cashews. And that's really quite a few calories in one serving. I also, when I bring vegetables home, and during the summer that was from the farmer's market, but now it's from the grocery store. If I don't cut up the carrots, I don't eat them. If I don't cut up the head of cauliflower, I like, by the way, raw cauliflower, but if I don't cut it up, I'm not going to eat it. So I try right away when I come back from the grocery store to cut up vegetables right away. The other thing is that alcohol has a lot of calories. It also does not have very many nutrients. And you should know that mental health issues and alcohol don't mix at all. They just don't mix. I don't care if it's a diagnosable illness or it's just some stress, they don't mix. So I'm not a goody two shoes, but you should just, just be careful. The other thing is that water. And I'm just going to tell you, in the hotel business, in our coffee breaks, we always in my hotels would have big containers of water, but we'd have berries like raspberries in them or sliced cucumbers or lemon slices. And we just use regular tap water. And I don't drink enough water, but during COVID, I made a commitment to taking a pitcher of water every morning from the tap. I like tap water, and I cut up whatever I have. So all I had was lemons, today. So I'm pretty much at the end of my pitcher, and here it is, nighttime. So now's a good time to take a drink of water if you haven't. The water tastes much better with raspberries in it and cucumbers. Now, emotional eating, I eat when I'm happy. I want to celebrate with food. I eat when I'm sad, and I eat when I'm bored. And so, I need to come up sometimes with other alternatives when I'm bored. Now we're going to talk about sleep, and then I'll check in again, with Gretchen to see if you have any ideas. There's lots written about sleep, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I want you to know that there are some functions that are done in our brain while we sleep. One of those is called pruning, like pruning the branches of a tree. And so if you don't go through all the sleep cycles, and REM sleep is just one example of a sleep cycle, if you don't go through them, then some of the important functions of the brain don't happen. So sleep is really important. All of us need 8 hours or more. Young people, probably, even more. Babies, more. But 8 hours, and it's hard because we have aches and pains. We have things that are ruminating in our mind. But there are some things that the sleep experts say are helpful. One of those is to go to bed at the same time and to get up at the same time. So even if you have days off, let's say those of you that volunteer work or work for pay, or you have grandkids that you take care of, even though you might have 2 days off from that, you need to try to go to bed at the same time, even on a Saturday night, or get up on a Sunday morning, same time you would if it was a work day. The other thing is a routine, and I'll give you an example of a routine that I use, and you have routines of your own. I brush my teeth and floss before I go to bed. That's part of my routine. I read my book club book or the rest of the newspaper as the last thing I do before I shut off the bedside light. And luckily for me, our bedside light is not blue light. It's just regular incandescent bulb and doesn't bother my sleep. And then I go right to sleep after I read. I also, if I had small children, I probably would read a bedtime story as part of my routine to my small child. So I don't know what your routine is, but try to follow it. You know, it's probably committed to memory now. The other thing is that our bedrooms should be 70 degrees or less. And I live in an old house, so we shut off the radiator in the bedroom, and we actually, sleep pretty cold. You can always add blankets. The other thing is that no blue light, which means no devices, including TV, about an hour and a half or more before you go to bed. Very hard to do. People are always looking at their phones. Now, there are some newer devices, there are some settings for blue light, but the sleep people say so far that that's not enough. So they really want you to stop using any device like an iPad, a PC, or personal computer, or a laptop, or your phone, or the TV about an hour and a half before bedtime. And good luck if you have kids, because you think it's easy to tell a 16-year-old to stop using their phone an hour and a half before they go to bed. The other thing is that try not to keep your phone by your bed, because you might be the boss that's sending an email at 1 a.m. And if the phone is by your employee's bed, there's going to be a ping, which might very well wake them up from a deep sleep. And why couldn't it wait till the next day? It wasn't something you needed them to answer at 1 a.m. I keep my phone occasionally by my bed because my sister has quite a few health issues and she lives in adult foster care. So if there's an emergency or something, I might have my phone by the bed, but typically mine's at a charging station on a different floor. The other thing is there is an app, it's called Insomnia Coach. Now, there's also a for-profit Insomnia Coach app, so make sure you have the one from the Veterans Affairs federal government agency. The VA has a free app called Insomnia Coach, and it was developed for veterans that were experiencing PTSD, which is a mental illness. And it's good for anybody. You don't have to live with a mental illness. It's really good. So Insomnia Coach, make sure it's from the Veterans Affairs Department, and it's free. Eye masks are not just for airplanes. However, if you share a bedroom with someone, maybe you should do your reading elsewhere, because if they're going to bed at a different time, an eye mask might not be enough. Also, in our house, our best window treatments are in our bedrooms. I wish I could afford nice window treatments that are blackouts in all the rooms, but they're just in our bedrooms. But that's a place that you want to have. In the city of Minneapolis, there's street lights that are glaring right in your window. I have an MTC bus that comes right by, so you want to have as good soundproofing and light proofing as you can. Now, before we talk about control, one of my favorite topics, is there anything in the chat we should talk about?
We had several people talk about other kinds of exercise. Laura Moore noted that there's free yoga called Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube. And she also had another affirmation for the Calm app. Sandy Connor loves cleaning because it controls that time we're about to talk to. Connect with nature is a good kind of option. Doing jigsaw puzzles on an online jigsaw puzzle site.
Oh.
Walking outside or inside the building if it's icy out. Wes noted that he doesn't go outside, he doesn't exercise, but he has fun doing video game or board games, plus all the work he does with Facebook and League and things. It keeps his mental energy and emotional liveliness going. Samantha noted that she clenches her teeth during the day, and to stop from doing that, she sings, which is nice. And she said that she cleared a path around the house to walk around the house every time she lets the dogs out. It's not long, but doing it 5 to 8 times a day adds up and helps her mood, which I think is true. Just going outside usually helps. It's at least something different and it smells different than your house. Mary Jo noted that Channel 17 has Sit and Be Fit, followed by a great painting show at 7 a.m. And there's a lot of free exercise programs on YouTube, that's for sure. And oh, and Cindy likes spending time with her dog. I like Cindy's dog too. So,
Well, thank you all. I have to say, I do a program like this at least once or twice a week. And, what makes it is people's ideas. And for a group of 20 some people, most ideas that I've had from this size group. So well done. So let's talk about a few other things. Some of it is limiting your exposure to news. CNN is a 24/7 news cycle. You can get a feed on your phone. And quite frankly, there's not enough breaking news. It's repeating the same old, same old. And, if that image is the airplane going into the Twin Towers thousands upon thousands of times, it affects your psyche. I had an aunt who was in her 80s during that time. She died at 94, and she was a CNN junkie. She was a retired dietitian at the Mayo Clinic. And she started sounding with a little bit of fearfulness, or she said, what about those poor families, that lost somebody at 9/11? This is a number of years ago. And I just said, how much CNN are you watching, Florence? And she said, oh, I turn it on religiously when I get up in the morning, and I don't shut it off till I go to bed. And I said, you sound a little affected by that. I said, why don't you just, monitor that a little bit and a little less news? And normally my Aunt Florence never took any advice from me. She took advice from me, and it wasn't in her voice anymore. So just remember that, NPR repeats the same story over and over again. So does, television. And then the other thing is the stuff that is in our control, controlling, staying home during this and not, putting yourself at risk, washing your hands for 20 seconds at a time, wearing a mask. And then it's also flu and cold season. We forget about that because it's not fun to have the flu either, and it's not fun to have a bad cold. And so, although this is mostly a respirative illness, COVID-19, it certainly can be on surfaces, but obviously the flu and colds can be on surfaces. So it's important to also keep those clean as well. So you can choose a little bit how to spend your time, and you certainly can stay safe using the things in bullet point number 3. Now, a routine is helpful, and don't get hung up on this specific routine. I just want to make sure that you have components of these in your routine. You don't have to wake up at 7, right? But it is important to have a wake up time that's about the same every day. It is important to spend time to have nourishment. I don't care what you have for breakfast. I don't even care what you have for lunch or dinner, but you want your blood sugar to be steady. And so it's important to make breaks for eating. As far as showering, I shower at night, and some people shower in the morning, but hygiene is important. Now I'm wearing, a decent looking sweater, right? And I also have dress pants on right now. I could be wearing sweatpants. You can't see me below the waist, but I psychologically want to say, okay, Kay, I'm working. So consequently for me, working means putting a little lipstick on, working making sure I have some earrings in, and working means I'm wearing dress pants right now. And I'm not wearing bunny slippers, I'm wearing shoes. So my point is that's how I make things normal. The other thing is, you start work, whether that be taking care of kids, or that be starting your children in their classroom online, or that's doing your volunteer work. There's some point that you have a start time, right? And you put in some exercise and movement during the day. It doesn't have to be at 10:30 a.m., but it's some break time. You try to get 30 to 60 minutes of something in movement in. And then checking in just means checking in with coworkers, checking in with League of Women Voter colleagues. Check-in is checking in with your children. Check-in is with the neighbor in your retirement community. So build in some social connection at a distance during this time as well. Now, journaling. I don't personally journal, but I've gotten some terrific ideas from people. So let me give you a couple ideas. One is there are journals that you can buy where on one page you can put 3 years of the same day. So you use it for 3 years, and then you can compare the same Thursday for 3 years. Like you can put the temperature, that it was on this same first Monday of February for 3 years. And so some people like that kind of journal. Some people just use a bound book that's blank pages, and they put, some of their poetry that they write in their head. Some people, like if I see an unusual bird, I use a day timer still. I'm kind of antiquated, but I use a day timer. I saw a bald eagle in December in South Minneapolis. So in my day timer, I wrote bald eagle. So I'm just saying that journal to write down poetry. If you're an artist, you could sketch something in your journal. You can write down something you want to remember. And you can put gratitude. Some people make a gratitude list every day in their journal. If you're looking for someone who can teach you some pointers about journaling, a person that I think is pretty good is Natalie Goldberg. So Natalie Goldberg, you can find her name on a website, and she teaches classes about journaling if that's something you're interested in. And I always keep a notepad next to my bed with a pen, because if something is keeping me awake and it's something I need to do the next day and I don't want to forget it, I write it down, and psychologically it said it's out of my brain, it's on paper, I can handle it tomorrow, time to go back to sleep. So that's one way that you can also, use a pad of paper. So go ahead and put things in the chat function if you have some journaling ideas, or if you like a certain company of journals, or you have an online journal you like, put that in the chat function. Oh, now we're talking animals. So, people are adopting more animals during COVID than ever. Rescue animals, many of them, or buying, purebred animal. And doesn't have to be a dog. Cats are cute, aren't they? Now, I don't have a pet, but I'm told at least dogs are kind of unconditional in their love, right? And when you're lonely, maybe a pet might be part of a way to mitigate that. But pets come in all forms. People like rodents, people like cats, people like dogs, people like pot-bellied pigs. So, but every time they have cat videos, like at the Walker, they always sold out. Whenever they had cat videos at the State Fair, at the grandstand, always sold out. Whenever they had cat videos at the field in downtown St. Paul where the Saints play, always sold out. So they're on to something. So you can foster animals, and then when there's someone to adopt the animal, then you give up the animal, but you fostered them until they found an adoptive family. So just this is now, you could put a JPEG if you want to in your chat box if you want to of your animal, but I'm sure there are a few stories out there about your animals. Positivity, there's quite a bit written about it, but just know that sometimes this is what you said, there's a TV show that makes you laugh. There's movies that you've been revisiting that always made you laugh. Some people are rereading books. In the Star Tribune, once a week, they always put in what I'm reading during COVID. And some people go back to their Jane Austen books. Some people go back to, Laurel and Hardy slapstick kinds of things. Lots of things give us joy. So you can read about positivity. I have a work colleague who twice a week, she on Teams, which is a software, she runs a 15-minute positivity class for any of coworkers at NAMI that want to attend. And so, she prepares something and it's for 15 minutes. I was introduced to Schitt's Creek, which is, Eugene Levy and Kathleen O'Hara. I always knew them from the Christopher Guest movies, and they're hilarious. And so someone told me about the Netflix Schitt's Creek series, and I binge watched it all in a month. I watched 6 seasons in a month, and I laughed out loud. Now, it may not be your cup of tea, but it made me laugh. And so, I'm sure some of you have things you can put in the chat that people would enjoy that kind of fit under positivity. I'm going to talk about volunteering, and then I'll stop again and see if there's anything in the chat. People have been asking me, I can't do things in person for safety reasons. Well, what kind of volunteering can you do if you can't do things in person. And I've got lots of ideas. So I think you do too. So please put those ideas in the chat function. But I'm going to give you a couple that you maybe haven't thought of. One is every retirement community, whether that be assisted living, long-term care, i.e. nursing homes, many of those folks can't eat together. They have to stay in their own apartment. And so they get their meals delivered perhaps to their door if meals are included in their plan. So I have a friend who has adopted a building, has 140 people, and she makes tray favors 1 day a week. Now there's 7 days in a week, there's 3 meals a day, and she's only making 141 party favors for 1 meal in 1 day. So in her building, there's plenty of opportunities to help. So she makes paper cranes, origami paper cranes, and she writes an inspirational message on each crane, 141 of them for those people for 1 day a week, 1 meal. Some people make paper flowers, and they put a note on each paper flower, 141 of them, and give them to the facility, and they put them as tray favors. So you could do Valentine's that way. This Sunday is Valentine's Day. You could make 141 Valentines so that everybody at that facility, gets a message of love and hope. So I'm just saying that's something you could do. You can make masks. People have already been doing that for a long time. You can get signed up as a volunteer for Little Friends of the Elderly, Little Brothers of the Elderly, Friends of the Poor, and they're a nonprofit, and they will train you to be a phone call person or a writer to a senior that they pair you up with so that they get mail or they get phone calls on a regular basis. Jewish Family Service of St. Paul does something similar. Quite a few churches and faith communities also have befriender programs where they will train you and then assign you to somebody to call so that they get a phone call and they have a conversation and you exchange maybe some letters and cards. So those are some ideas, but I bet you have some good ideas too. So put those in the chat. Now, one of you already shared this earlier, about a half hour ago. I do not attend AA meetings, but I know that 1 day at a time is a slogan or something that is a tenet of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what? When you're not feeling right with the world, we tend to worry about the future, or we have regrets, or we have old records playing in our brain about the past. And you try your best, but it's really hard to stay in the moment today. But if you can, do your best. And if it's hard to do, that's maybe when you get some therapy. That's what talk therapy can help you with. And so do your best to stay in today. And you already gave that advice earlier, someone, so you did a nice job on that. Okay, before I continue, anything in the chat function? Any cute pictures of pets?
I didn't see that. Wes noted that he uses Facebook to track COVID statistics. That's kind of a form of journaling. Laura Moore suggested Wreck This Journal. They're for kids because they're fun. It makes you think outside the box, and you can get them at Target. She has a link there to find them at Target. So I don't know what Wreck the Journal is, but that was her recommendation. Catherine Welchel says her cat's snuggly and is very comforting, especially when she has tuna open.
Oh.
Sue Butler likes to always read a book. Other people talk about Wreck the Journal too, so that must be something that I've missed, but other people know about it. Somebody here does Meals on Wheels with a colleague once a week. Somebody does advocacy for children with disabilities. Somebody has a crochet project going at all time and trying new recipes. Also doing counted cross stitch. And then you can also, if you like to be outdoors, you can volunteer to hide for search and rescue dogs to find. So that would be a fun and unique thing.
Well, I'm not don't want to even cut you off because these are terrific ideas, but I have about 10 minutes left, so I am going to continue, but good ideas. And so remember, I asked you to write down some things that are on your mind that have been hard for you in the last 11 months, and then some things that you learned today that maybe you'd be willing to try, you've got some terrific ideas from your colleagues. Now, the only thing I want to talk further about in technology is the third bullet point. I love email because you can handle it. You can delete it. You can answer the question pretty quickly because email is meant to be short conversation. And then you also can forward it to somebody else to handle, right? If you're working, sometimes you can forward it to somebody to handle. And I have great satisfaction. I have the temperament where I like to check things off, like I did that, did that, did that. So when I'm working on something I don't like doing, then of course I want to take breaks to do email because email is so much more fun than working on your employee reviews. Okay, so just want you to know that. Make sure you block off time and don't continue to go back to your email every 5 minutes. And quiet place, good luck if you live in a house where there's lots of people, lots of commotion, but do your best. Maybe it's just getting a bath once in a while and having a book and some bubbles in the bath. And if there's another adult in the house that can take care of the toddlers, that'd be good. Because I don't even think if you have toddlers, you probably can't even go to the bathroom. And just know that it's good to have a space. At NAMI, if we were in the offices, we have a size of a big closet as a quiet room. And if somebody needs to pray, they can go there. If somebody needs to make a personal phone call, because we work in cubes, they can go there. There's a fountain that you can plug in that room that's bubbly with water. That's where we keep our bouncy balls. You know, if you want to sit at your desk on a bouncy ball, that's where we keep those. So, you know, if you can create a quiet space in a workplace or you can create a quiet space in your home, do the best you can if you have a little extra space. Not everybody does. You cannot reduce stress or you cannot get better from any illness, cancer, heart disease, a mental health issue, without your spirituality. And so oftentimes there's an intersection between your culture and your spirituality. So during these tough times, it makes some sense to reach out to a spiritual leader, to reach out to other members of your community, and that might be a faith community. And, you know, the connection to culture cannot be underestimated. I live next door to a woman who's a chaplain at a Methodist hospital, and she probably comes from a Christian faith community, but chaplains are trained to be able to help people of all backgrounds. But when she has someone who's native, she often calls in a healer from the native culture, perhaps to do a tobacco ritual. Or she may ask a shaman in a Hmong culture to join her on her rounds. So, you know, it's important. Culture plays an important role in people's healing and in reducing stress. Now, good faith leaders, they may be able to help with your spiritual connection, but if it gets to be a bigger issue, that might be a mental health issue, a good faith leader knows when it's time to hand you off, perhaps to a health professional. Stay connected, keep socially distanced, but that doesn't mean to not be connected. May have to be connected by Zoom or FaceTime or standing 6 feet apart outdoors with masks. But, you know, it's important to connect, and we should connect sometime more than once during a day. I do play games online. I play tournament bridge. I play duplicate bridge. I play internationally, and I do that once a week. I play Farkle online with friends. So, you know, games are fun. And if you're a grandparent, it's a good way to keep grandkids engaged because it's hard to keep their attention on FaceTime and on Zoom. We talked about grief. It's different for everybody. But, you know, every obituary I read says we will gather sometime next year after COVID-19 or when we can. We're going to be going to a lot of memorial services, aren't we? All clustered together. And that's hard in itself. When I was running a retirement community for 5 years, I went to 70 funerals of my residents. I've never dreamed I'd go to 70 funerals in less than 5 years. And so it does take a toll because these are people I miss. I knew them well. And ban perfectionism. You know, we should have a big red circle with a line through it. You know, I thought I'd be practicing Spanish during COVID. I thought I'd be cleaning out closets. Hasn't happened. Hasn't happened. I mean, work is taking more time than it took before. Now I work 60 hours a week instead of 50. Okay. So, just have lower expectations, right? Doesn't mean that you can't get back to how things maybe were before, but right now, give yourself some grace. I think we feel guilty when we have healthy family and someone else has lost someone, maybe to COVID. I think we feel guilty when someone's lost their business or they haven't been able to work because they own a restaurant or they work in the airline business and we have a job. I think we feel lucky that we took a risky vacation and nobody got sick and other people did and they were super spreaders. I mean, there's all this guilt and, it's natural, but we have to, again, give ourselves some grace and compassion. Acknowledge maybe the guilt that you feel. Try not to dwell on it. I have to apologize from time to time when I'm irritable and crabby. And change how you talk to yourself. And let me explain what I mean by that. When we talk to our spouses, when we talk to our partners, when we talk to our grandkids, usually we're pretty loving. Not always, but we usually are pretty loving. But when you think about the things that you say inside your head to yourself, it's things like, oh my gosh, look at all my wrinkles on Zoom. Oh my gosh, my teeth are kind of yellow. Instead of, at least Susan's laughing. But my point is, we need to be as loving to ourselves with those internal messages as we are to those we love. So your self-talk should be as loving as the talk that goes out to your grandkids and to your kids. Hard to do, but try for it. Try for it. Okay, I have to almost put this as a sticky note on the mirror. I have coworkers like, where are these evaluation forms that you said you'd get to me? Give people a little bit of grace and compassion. You have no idea what they're going through trying to maybe help kids at home with school. You have no idea financially how they're doing. You have no idea about the worry that they're experiencing about their older adults in their family. We just don't know. So give people a little grace and time. Grace, space, and time. Now, remember I said I would talk a little bit about what if the stress is more than you can handle by yourself, more than you can do talking to a friend. So if you're feeling numb, I don't mean numb fingers. I mean, you're not feeling your feelings. If you're feeling a little fearful, more so than you've ever felt before, if you have some anxiety, might be time to see a health practitioner. If your appetite, you're eating too much or too little, changes for you. If your energy isn't the same as it normally is, if you aren't enjoying things that used to give you great joy, activities, might be time to see your health practitioner. By that, I mean your nurse practitioner, your family doctor, your internal medicine doctor. Maybe it's your pediatrician for the kids. If you have difficulty concentrating, some memory issues, don't assume it's Alzheimer's. Because guess what? Depression also has those signs and symptoms. An underactive thyroid also has those signs and symptoms. So get in to see the doctor. It could be anything. If you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having nightmares that you previously didn't have, if there's images that keep building a record groove in your brain, just get in to see your doctor and get a good physical workup. If you have physical things that are gastrointestinal related, if you have body pains you didn't have before, if your heart is racing, you could have heart disease, right? You could have, you could have something that's serious or not serious. It's just important to get it checked out. If you have diabetes already, if you have heart disease already, if you have high blood pressure already, if you live with Parkinson's disease already, it's good to get it checked out because it's now been almost a year and it's important to see your health practitioner. If family reports that you're really short-tempered, that you're lashing out, that it's not normal for you, pay attention to what they're saying. They're saying it out of love, and it might be time to see your health practitioner. If you used to be clean and sober, you haven't used alcohol or you haven't smoked for a long time and you start using again, that's a change. Doesn't mean you can't stop again, but that's an indicator something's not exactly right. If you are using alcohol in a different way than you did before, like maybe you used to have a glass of wine with dinner and now you're having two, that's different. So again, pay attention, get in to see your health practitioner. Now, some other resources, if you have Medicare, if you have a health plan through your employer, there are therapists available. Now, sometimes there's a copay, sometimes there's an out-of-pocket minimum. But if you work, you might have a free benefit called an Employee Assistance Plan, EAP for short. At NAMI, it's a benefit that we have. It's free. And at NAMI, our plan allows us to see 3 visits with a counselor at no charge. And it's private. My employer doesn't know if I use it. They just know that this many employees use the benefit during the year. They don't give names. So that's something the whole family can use it. So if you have someone in your family that has an EAP plan through work, the whole family can use that EAP plan. Or you can use your health plan to see a therapist, for example. Let your manager, even if it's the manager of your volunteer job, let them know when you're struggling. Maybe you have to cut back your hours a little bit. Maybe you're going to job share with somebody. I have a couple coworkers that had to cut back their hours because they've got kids going to school at home. So that might be an accommodation. If you're the employer, recognize that people are different. Try to be flexible. If someone can work a little later in the day to accommodate the kids going to school, do that. You have to check in, just like you do if it was in person, only you might check in by a private call or on Zoom, checking in with your employees or checking in with your volunteers. And lean in. I noticed you didn't have your camera on tonight, Mary. Usually at our league meetings, you always have your camera on. What's wrong? So you call them right after this. I didn't see you at the league meeting tonight. I was worried about you. How come you weren't here? You okay? So, just checking in with people, especially when they have a change. Now, I'm at it at 8 o'clock. I need 5 more minutes. Are you okay, Susan, if I do 5 more minutes? Okay. We offer a suicide prevention class called QPR, and I'm actually teaching it this week. So if someone wants to attend it this week, it's an hour and a half. The QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. If you go to the NAMI Minnesota website, I'm teaching on Wednesday, but we try to offer the class at least every 2 weeks. It's free, and everyone 16 and older can take it. It's for the general public. And suicide has increased during COVID nationwide, but it's been increasing for the last 20 years. And so it's really important that the general public know the basics about preventing suicide. Not all suicides can be prevented, but I'm passionate about this topic, even more passionate about suicide prevention than I am about minding your mental health during COVID-19. So you need to have some phone numbers in your phone, so I'm going to go through those. And these are numbers that I'd like you to write down and put them in your phone. So there's a national text line, texting, if you have a mental health crisis. It's 741-741. So that's the text number. And you put MN in the message. That way the person who responds is going to know you're in Minnesota. So you text 741-741. Now you can give this number to family members. You can give this number to people that you love that struggle with mental health issues. And you also can put it in your own phone. There's a national suicide hotline number. It's a 1-800 number. And in a year from now, it's going to become a 3-digit number. Just like 911 is a 3-digit number, the National Suicide Crisis Mental Health Hotline number is going to become 3 digits. But until then, it's 1-800-273-8255. It's 24/7, just like the text line is 24/7. I need you to take another class from me if you want to know how to use 911, because people of color are not very likely to call the police, right, in a mental health crisis, but they can be very helpful. Even in Minneapolis, they can be very helpful. So take another class from me when I can spend more time and talk to you about when to call 911 and how to call 911. Now, every county in Minnesota has a mental health crisis number. And you can use a cell phone and use ** crisis. All 86 counties in Minnesota have accessibility to the mental health crisis number by ** crisis. You have to put in the stars. And they're 24/7, but the cell phone identifies where you're located. So my sister, for example, lives in Blue Earth County. It's Mankato. So I have ** crisis in my phone. And if I'm calling from Mankato, they know I'm in Mankato then. Now, you also can have a hard landline number for all the crisis numbers. So if you had a child that was at UMD, University of Minnesota Duluth, you should have St. Louis County's landline number for crisis in your phone in addition to ** crisis. Because sometimes cell phones don't work or the tower doesn't work. So it's important to have the 24/7 individual crisis number for the county where you might have someone who's struggling. So now, NAMI does education, we do support, we do advocacy, including legislative advocacy. Our executive director, Sue Abderholden, is really the go-to person in Minnesota for legislative advocacy. We use other mental health organizations. We're a legislative team. Our Day on the Hill for mental health this year, I'm going to give you the exact date. It's going to be online, including our visits with legislators are going to be online. But Day on the Hill is March 11th. That's Mental Health Day on the Hill. So if that's of interest to you, we can help you with that. Our website gives more information. So here's my email. If you need resources, we have a helpline that's during business hours, but you can reach out to me and I can connect you with other resources and other colleagues. And I can often answer questions with resources. We are not mental health practitioners at NAMI. We're educators, we're grant writers, we're executive directors, but we're good at resources. So my initial K, my last name King at NAMIMN.org. Our helpline is a 651 number, or we have a 1-888 number, but it's business hours. It's not a crisis number. It's a number for resources. So thanks for inviting me. I admire greatly League of Women Voters, and I'm glad that you gave me an hour and a half. Thank you. And we have lots of other classes, so you can invite us back. You can take our classes, go to our website, and we have many free classes during COVID.
Thank you very much. Let's see, I want to note that we did get Laura Moore said that she's starting this year with her 2 teenage daughters. Valentine's Day is I Love Me Day. So she took your advice there. Thank you very much, Kay, for coming, and we appreciate you being part of our program today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and reach out if we can help. So best wishes, take good care of yourself, and I'm going to sign out. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.